Hello and welcome to UAT Time within the United Countries special by First Ukraine. You can find us on the frequencies available on our website, firstuat.com. I'm Sergey Velichanskiy.
And I am Olivier Vedrine. UAT Time is dedicated to bring Ukraine and Europe closer to each other by introducing the real Ukraine to the rest of the world.
As of today, we join a world campaign, Let My People Go. 25 Ukrainian citizens have been illegally detained and kept on the Russian territory at this time. 25 is the number of people that we know of. Could there be more? You can never be sure when dealing with Russian-backed terrorists. You can find more info under the hashtags #FreeSavchenko and Let My People Go. And today we want to dedicate quality time to discuss Ukraine and EU relationships, the myths and the truth.
Our guest today is Joselyn Guitton, the first secretary at the delegation of the European Union in Ukraine.
Thank you very much for joining us. I think the European Union and Ukraine relationships, probably they're one of the most important and vital issues that is being discussed because, you know, that was the reason for the Euromaidan to take place, the signing of the association. But then there are other issues that come up and suddenly people don't see a lot of things, you know, that would hopefully develop, like the free visa, the free trade, all those things. Some of them are happening, some of those things, but people don't know them because there is a lack of communication. So one of the first probably questions would be, are Eastern Partnership and the EU-Ukraine Association Agreement meant to force Ukraine to choose between East and West?
I think that's a very valid question, and that's probably one of the biggest myths that has developed in Ukraine, but probably in Russia and in Western Europe too over the past few years. One thing I want to stress is that on the EU side, we believe very much that trade is a win-win, is a win-win process. Everyone can benefit of more free trade. That's why in the EU we support very much the World Trade Organization, and we are very happy to sign trade agreements with plenty of countries all over the world. And what is true for the EU is also true for Ukraine. And Ukraine is legally, technically, economically, fully able to develop closer economic relationship with Russia, with the EU, but with plenty of other countries all over the world. So by having deeper economic ties with the EU, there is absolutely no reason why Ukraine could not have also strong economic ties with Russia. So in no case, the trade agreement which the EU has offered to Ukraine, this association agreement, was a way to say to Ukraine, if you get closer economic relationship with us, you have to give up your economic relationship with Russia. Not at all. I can quote you a perfect example, for instance. A country like Serbia has a free trade agreement with Russia and has a free trade agreement with the EU. And that's not a problem at all. So there is no legal, no technical reason why you cannot have economic relationship with the countries.
That is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Because I don't know why, but our government always plays this card that, you know, you have to choose either.
Let me maybe make one thing clear. What is true is that Ukraine could not be part of the customs union, which is now the Eurasian Economic Union, because it's a customs union.
Sure.
And once you're part of a customs union, you need to have a single economic policy. Just to make it clear, France, for instance, could not sign a free trade agreement alone with another member, with the US, for instance, because France belongs to the EU, and then in the EU we need to have a single trade policy. And we need to speak with one voice. So if Ukraine wanted to join the customs union, which is now the Eurasian Economic Union, then it would not be possible for Ukraine anymore to have a free trade agreement on its own with the EU. But you can completely have two separate free trade agreements, one with Russia and one with the EU. That's absolutely, that's the case with, I could quote you dozens of examples.
Yeah, like Serbia.
That's
amazing because, you know, not a lot of communication on that.
I'm sure there are forums, there are economical forums and discussions that the people that are into this topic, they probably know. But the majority of people on just a basic level the best thing they know about economical forums is just to report that they took place. That's all. The majority of people really don't understand that.
The thing that you have to admit is a rather technical issue, and indeed plenty of people typically, when I arrived in Ukraine in 2013, you had plenty of anti-EU movements who were trying to explain that indeed it was either or. You could not, you had to choose between East and West, between Russia and the EU, which is absolutely not true. And I think there is no reason why Ukraine should stop trading with Russia. Of course, I know it's today, obviously, it's simply that Russia is imposing sanctions on Ukraine because Ukraine signed this trade agreement with the EU, this association agreement.
Yes.
But this is a purely political issue.
Yes.
There is no legal, no economic reason why such a trade agreement would harm the Russian economy or because why Ukraine would have to choose.
I have another question because
Yes.
if the EU had consulted Russia on the Eastern Partnership or the EU-Ukraine Association Agreement, could we have avoided this crisis?
I wouldn't. Well, first of all, the negotiations on this agreement were extremely transparent. They started in 2008 when we launched the EU-Eastern Partnership. It was a partnership between the EU on one side and 6 countries on the other side: Belarus, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Moldova, Ukraine, and Armenia. And then trade negotiations started. These negotiations were, I wouldn't say completely transparent, because you always need a certain degree of secrecy when you negotiate a trade deal. But everyone knew that there was a trade agreement being negotiated between the EU and Ukraine. Second, in the meantime, you had several summits between the EU and Russia. And surprisingly, Russia never raised any concern before 2013. Before the Maidan Revolution, never ever Russia raised any concern. So I would say that Russia was completely informed of the topic. Then consulted, it's a slightly different issue. The thing is that it's a bilateral agreement. Ukraine is a sovereign country. I don't see why, when we negotiate a free trade agreement with a sovereign country, we should ask the permission.
I am agree with you. I am totally agree with you. That's the key point.
So right now we are negotiating a trade agreement with the US. We don't ask the permission to Canada, and exactly the opposite actually, because the EU has just concluded a trade agreement with Canada, and we haven't asked the permission to the US, and the US haven't complained. So it's a fact that Russia was perfectly well informed. If Russia had concerned, Russia could totally have made this concern.
I have another question, because I say, okay, if the EU had consulted Russia on the Eastern Partnership or the EU-Ukraine Association Agreement, could we have avoided this crisis? You answered me, but I have another question. I think I remember, maybe I am wrong, but we proposed to Russia to be member of the Eastern Partnership. We proposed to Russia, yes, to be member a few years ago.
Actually, we proposed to Russia to be associated to the EU neighborhood policy, which was a broader project, but less which was basically the genesis of the Eastern Partnership, and we indeed proposed to Russia to be associated to it. Russia refused. It was, of course, a free choice by Russia. But indeed, you're absolutely right. Russia was totally associated to this process, simply because I'm coming back to my first point. The logic of the EU is that trade and political relationships, we very much believe that it's not a zero-sum game. It's a win-win process. We have all interest in developing closer links politically, economically, with all of our neighbors. It's not because we want to have a more integrated economy with Ukraine that we don't want to have the same with Russia. Actually, the EU is the largest trade partner of Russia, so it's also Russia's interest.
But also we are yes, but also we have to integrate that we are postmodern society, and Russia is not a postmodern society in the way of thinking. And you know that the Putin policy is not win to win. You need a winner, you need a loser. That's very different.
And that's where it is an additional question, actually, and I'm sure there will be a lot of them. Does Russia view Ukraine as a client state?
As a
client state.
In which sense of the term you mean?
The state that is within their closest proximity, that they have exclusive rights upon, or
I think you have just mentioned two different words, and which are actually we have two different meanings. Geography matters, of course, and I would never deny the fact that Ukraine and Russia have a huge common history, and we cannot deny that, and geography will always remain. Which means that, of course, Russia and Ukraine will probably have a special relation forever, just as France has with all of its neighbors. It's obvious. And I think we have to take that into account. It's a fact, so we have to take facts into account. But on the other hand, we live in the system into which we live in, from a geopolitical point of view today, is based on sovereignty. Also, all member states of the UN, of the United Nations, are sovereign member states, which means that no member state has a special right on any other member state. No member state has a veto right on any other any other state foreign policy, for instance. So there are two different things, I would say.
Okay. Let's move on. Could the trade part of the agreement lead to economical difficulties? And I'm talking about the Ukraine side.
Yeah.
Well, the logic of free trade is that from an economic and from a theoretical, economically and empirical point of view, you observe more or less always the same when a country is getting more open. Overall, free trade brings benefits, and that's pretty much what we've seen in all countries all over the world which have opened to free trade. When you look at the most dynamic countries in Southeast Asia, for instance, or the eastern member states of the EU, all those countries have benefited a lot from becoming more open. On the other hand, what we also know is that free trade creates changes, transformation. So some companies, some people may suffer. Is it a reason to be protectionist and say, no, I don't want to open because a small part of our population of my companies will suffer? Yeah. Is it a good reason to say, I want to refuse global benefits to avoid small losses? I strongly doubt it. I think it's the role of the government to say, okay, we have large benefits, we can become more modern. It's my role to redistribute, to make this transformation as easy as possible for everyone. Actually, we take this very much into account in the trade agreement between the EU and Ukraine, simply because this agreement is entering into force progressively. For instance, all the other transformations which are foreseen by the agreement are progressive, in order to give time to Ukrainian companies to adopt new rules, to become ready to face more competition from European companies, and so on. But at the end of the day, I think it would be a very bad mistake to think, okay, Ukraine is not ready now. Ukraine will never be ready. That's precisely because Ukraine has always behaved, in my view, in a way that let's wait a bit more and let's wait to be ready to fight on the Ukrainian market, on the worldwide markets. But other countries are not waiting. Emerging countries with which Ukraine is competing right now are not waiting for Ukraine to become competitive. So, of course, it's a transformation. Let's be frank. When you look at countries like Poland, Czech Republic, some companies have disappeared indeed. But does it mean that Poland today is in a worse off situation than it was 25 years ago? I would strongly disagree with that. It's a process. It's complicated. No transformation is easy. But at the end of the day, I think it would be a very bad mistake to refuse this transformation.
In our interview, we will ask you a question. This is a very simple question, but this is the question. They are the question that everybody wants to know.
Do you want to touch on another question?
Yeah.
Okay, but I want to...
You want to add something?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Because here, about the free trade, on one of the... Euro integration website, there is a statement that there is only one way for a Ukrainian producer to enter the EU market, is he or she must adhere to the requirements and principles in effect in Europe. These principles are already being violated as a result of Ukraine's current moratorium on inspections of enterprises working in the food industry. Is that true?
Well, it's a very specific question, but yes, indeed, in the sense that the EU will not change its internal rule to please Ukrainian companies. The EU is a competitive market. We have quite high standards to protect EU consumers. And we cannot say in the EU, because that we want to, that we are ready to let enter into on the European market products which are not safe enough. And indeed, the fact that today Ukraine is not well on specific markets, particularly on the rules which are related to sanitary issues, is behaving in a more relaxed way and saying that you don't need to comply with this and that for a limited period of time. It does not help. That's true, because it's a fact, and that's, I can say it very openly. EU rules are complicated, and if you want to sell on the EU market, you have to comply with European rules. Full stop. This will be the same. This is the case now. This will be the same for a while at least. So of course it's difficult, but Ukraine have all the assets necessary to be able to enter the EU market. And that's why what the sentence you quoted is absolutely correct.
And that's very good for Ukraine, because at the end Ukraine will have a new product.
Well,
and they
transitional time.
Yeah, and that's very important for Ukraine, because as you said, Ukraine has everything to be a successful country. Everything.
Before you move on to another question, I want to invite everyone to our Facebook pages. If you're on Facebook, find us there, facebook.com/FirstUA channel or facebook.com/UAT time, and let us know what you think, and let us know who you want us to invite to the show, so our programs will be more and more interesting for you. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
And then, we took some very simple questions. As I said, that those questions are very simple, but everyone wants to know the answers of this for these questions. Then, my question will be, does the agreement with the EU prevent Ukraine from establishing or maintaining closer links with the custom union, Eurasian Union, between the Russian Federation, Belarus, and Kazakhstan? You already
I partly touched this topic, but I think it's quite an important one, because indeed it's one of which is a topic which is very often misunderstood. So just to be very clear on that, Ukraine can completely have this association agreement with the EU and, for instance, sign a free trade agreement with the Eurasian Economic Union. That's completely possible. What is not possible is for Ukraine to have both an association agreement with the EU and be part of the Eurasian Economic Union.
Then that's very nice for Ukraine, because Ukraine can have a free agreement treaty with EU and free agreement treaty with Russia, with Kazakhstan, and with Belarus. That's a very good for Ukraine.
Provided that Russia and Ukraine wants to have closer economic relations right now. But from a technical point of view, absolutely. From a political point of view, that's another issue.
That's another question. That's another question.
And it may take some time to settle all these things and feelings and emotions and all that. But
then maybe I can ask a new question. Will Ukrainian companies be able to cope with the introduction of the EU standards and regulations, or will they lose out to EU companies?
Well, I think two answers to that question, because indeed there are almost two questions into that. First of all, once again, it's a challenge. And that's precisely why the agreement foresees that this will be progressive. When you look at the details of the agreement, what it says is basically that Ukraine will have to adopt EU rules and standards, but that it is spread over a number of years, up to 10 years basically. It's on a case-by-case basis. For the easiest rules, it's in a few years. For the most complicated ones, it's up to 10 years. So of course, I don't deny the fact that it will be complicated, but plenty of other countries have been able to go through that process. So why would Ukraine not be able to do it? Second, does it mean that Ukrainian company will suffer from higher competition? From a theoretical point of view, yes, because of course now the Ukrainian market is becoming more open to products from the EU because you have less tariff duties. But on the other hand, what you should observe in practical terms on the Ukrainian market is that it's very rare that you have products from Germany, from France, from Sweden competing face-to-face with Ukrainian products. In most cases, these are not the same markets.
Yeah.
If you look at cars, for instance, when someone can afford and want to buy a European car, this person is not hesitating between a Ukrainian car and a German car. And I could give you other examples, but there are very few cases where there is direct competition between Ukrainian and foreign and Western products, Western European products. So it's very theoretical, and I doubt that today competition will increase so much that Ukrainian companies would suffer, specifically because of this association agreement. Because in some cases, maybe, yes.
We are in two different type of products.
I really think so.
I'm agreeing.
To bring a little fun into our discussion is when you're talking about cars.
Zaporozhye.
At first I thought you were talking about cows. So I was like, between the German cow and the Ukrainian cow.
That must be my French accent, I'm sorry for that.
No, it's all right. But I was like, but there are some good cows here in Ukraine,
Absolutely.
Definitely not competing with the cars.
When he spoke about cars, I was thinking about Zaporozhye, the Zaporozhye car.
I know, yeah.
That was a Ukrainian brand.
That's the one that you need to push. Well, anyway. We've got a couple of more minutes in this show, but we will continue. We have a lot of more questions in the part 2. So stay tuned and definitely check us out on Facebook and YouTube. Now, the next question is, will Ukraine's traditional exports to Russia, as well as cooperation with Russia companies, be disturbed because of the adoption of European standards?
Well, it's becoming a very theoretical question now because of all the sanctions or the retaliatory measures that Russia has adopted against Ukraine, trade between between Ukraine and Russia has decreased enormously over the past 2 years. So this trade is becoming very negligible. That's something we very much regret because, of course, it's not good for Ukrainian economy. And as I've said, geography matters. So it's a sad thing that Ukraine and Russia are disrupting economic links. But in any case, it's absolutely not because of the association agreement. Well, first of all, for a very simple reason, is that the association agreement has entered into force 3 months ago.
Yes.
And trade between Ukraine and Russia has started to decrease more than 2.5 years ago.
Without obvious reasons.
Yeah, well, without obvious, with pure political reasons.
Political reasons.
So that's the first thing. So clearly, trade has decreased, but obviously not because of the agreement, which was not into force. Second, the EU is a main import partner of Russia. And it means that European companies, when they want to sell on the Russian market, they simply have to comply with Russian rules, and still they export a lot. The European companies export a lot to Russia. So the fact that you have European rules, and of course European companies comply with European rules. When you have a French, Spanish company, an Italian one, they comply with the rules of the EU. And still they are very much able to sell on the Russian market. Yeah. So I struggle to see any reason why Ukraine, by complying with European rules, could not sell on the Russian market anymore.
I think this will be more easy.
The rules are different. I guess you mean that European rules are often higher quality. Yeah. Very often they are different, so it's not always easy to compare. But in many cases, you're right, they are of higher quality. But in any case, we could argue from a theoretical point of view, but at least from a practical point of view, you see plenty of European cars in the street of Moscow.
I will have a big sense of humor, but if you go to Russia, everybody is talking about a Euro remont and not about a risky remont. Yeah. That's an example of European quality.
Well, yeah, Euro remont came all the way from early 80s, pretty much. Yeah. So, anyway, we have a lot more questions to discuss in the part 2. So stay tuned and find us on the internet. It was United Country UAT time by First Ukraine. Our guest was Joselyn Guitton, the first secretary of the delegation of the EU in Ukraine.
Olivier Vedrine and Sergey Velichanskiy were working for you in the studio. Stay with us and we will show to you the real Ukraine.
Thank you for being with us. Have a good day and see you soon.